Bonjour, mes amis.
Hello, this is I Go Travel with Don Barnett, and we're going to Quebec City. It's a very historic place. In this travelogue, we'll take a look at the Frontenac Hotel, which is a world-renowned hotel. And we'll take a look at the Battle of the Plains of Abraham. And did you know that they had two battles, and the French won the second battle? Well, if the French won the second battle, how come it turned over to the British? Well, you'll find out in this travelogue. So let's look at Quebec City. It's a historic place. We are in the province of Quebec, second biggest in Canada, and a beautiful outdoor province similar to the great outdoors you see in northern Ontario and northern parts of the prairie provinces and in BC. I bought a few t-shirts in Quebec City that illustrate this outdoors and camping characteristic of Quebec. It's a touch of Quebec humor. This is a Quebec version of what is meant when you talk about a midnight snack. Quebec City is a big tourist area, and these t-shirts and Quebec humor were really big hits with the tourists, including me. If you've cooled your feelings about participating in a midnight snack, let's look at some pictures of Quebec City. This is the Quebec Provincial Parliament or Legislative Building or National Assembly, as it is called. Like many places where urban development has marched, many unique historic buildings are becoming dwarfed by modern skyscrapers. You can see this in both Quebec City and Montreal, where once cities of church spires on the horizon and pointing to the sky, these have been replaced with a new horizon of modern skyscrapers, for better or worse, and sometimes it's, I think, for worse. Back in 1948, then Premier Maurice Duplessis replaced the British ensign flag with this all-new Quebec flag for the province. As we drove along the St. Lawrence River from Montreal to Quebec City, we passed by many historic Catholic churches as we drove through the rural Quebec countryside. We crossed over the St. Lawrence River on the Pierre Laporte Bridge and stayed at a campground in Levis, the city which is on the opposite side of the river from Quebec City. This bridge was named in honor of the Quebec Deputy Premier who was kidnapped and killed during the political unrest and crisis involving Quebec's search for greater sovereignty in 1970. The crisis led to Canada's then Prime Minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, invoking the rare and only peacetime use of the War Measures Act to investigate the killing and get control of the political crisis. This bridge is the largest main-span suspension bridge in Canada. Suspension bridges like this one are those huge modern bridges in which the main load-bearing travel deck is suspended and held up by vertical suspenders in the form of steel cables or chains. Finally, the sunshine came, and the Quebec City skyline is dominated by this huge and spectacular hotel, the Chateau Frontenac. The Frontenac holds the Guinness World Record as the most photographed hotel in the world. Count Frontenac was an early French governor of the colony called New France. He battled both the Iroquois and the British. In 1690, the British sailed up the St. Lawrence River and demanded the surrender of the fort. Frontenac's famous reply was to the effect that my only reply will be from the mouths of my cannons and muskets, and he promptly drove the British into retreat. Here are some of the grounds around the hotel. The Chateau Frontenac was designed by the famous American architect Bruce Price. Without a formal university education, Price designed many famous and beautiful buildings, including the Banff Springs Hotel in Alberta, in addition to the Frontenac here. The Frontenac opened its doors to the public in 1893. Just outside the hotel on the grounds, this is a statue of Jacques Karcher, the first French explorer to map the St. Lawrence River. He called the big Iroquois villages where Montreal and Quebec now stand as the country of Canadas. Canada is a Huron Iroquois word, Canada, K-A-N-A-T-A. Canada means village. Karcher called the Iroquois people in the villages, or Canadas, as Canadians. Canadians lived in the Canadas. He also made 3 groundbreaking voyages into the New World and never lost a single ship. He also stopped at about 50 harbors and never had a single mishap or conflict with the local people he met. Few explorers hold such a record. Also on the grounds is this statue of Samuel de Champlain, historically called the father of New France, who officially founded the settlement of Quebec in 1608. These are some people who greeted and entertained the tourists. And this is inside the Frontenac Hotel, a beautiful, beautiful style of building. Quebec is winter country, and they put on a terrific and a renowned winter festival that draws many people from all over the world. The Quebec City Winter Carnival is the largest winter carnival in the world and is the 3rd largest overall carnival in the world, behind only the ones in Rio, Brazil, and New Orleans in the U.S. It includes a canoe race over the ice and across the river, a 460-meter ice skating race through town, cross-country ski races and snowshoe races, and a hotel made only of chunks of ice that has slept thousands of winter tourists. Earlier I said we stayed across the river from Quebec City at the smaller city of Levis. I took this photo from the Quebec City side, and Levis is across the river. I asked someone there, what is the meaning of the word Levis? And then learned that there were actually 2 battles back in 1759 between the French and the British. Not just the one battle called the Battle of the Plains of Abraham that history talks about. The whole area is a National Historic Site today. Now, General Levis was second in command of the French forces at the Battle of the Plains of Abraham. And after Montcalm, the commander, was killed, he led the French forces to victory in this second battle. Here's the story that is not so commonly known. Initially, before the Battle of the Plains of Abraham, the French were safe behind the walls of the Quebec fortress that was high above the river. The British set up across the river where the city of Levis is located today. The British cannon fire pounded the Quebec fortress across the river, but the French held safe behind its walls. Then one morning, the French awoke in surprise to see that the British in the night had crossed the river and were camped right outside the walls of the fortress. The French decided to come out from the safety of the fortress and attack the British before the British got time to get entrenched just outside the gates. This was a fatal error by the French. The gates of the city, of Quebec City, remain intact today. The battle itself lasted only about 1 hour. The British general James Wolfe was killed at the outset. His final words being, when he was told the French were in retreat, they were, "God be praised, I will die in peace." General Montcalm, the French commander, was killed during the French retreat. His dying words being to the effect that all the better to die, I will not see the British in Quebec. After the battle on the Plains of Abraham, it was the British who now occupied the fortress, and the French army, under the command of General Levis, were camped outside the walls. The tables were reversed. The British felt they needed to come out of the fortress and try to drive the French from the fortress doorstep. But they decided to not make the error they had seen the French made and contact the enemy too far away from the safety of the fortress. If they failed, they thought, but were close enough to the fortress, they would be able to retreat safely behind the fortress walls. That is exactly what happened. In this second battle, called the Battle of Saint Foy, Levis and the French hammered the British, hurling them backwards in disarray. But the British were close enough to the fortress to retreat to safety behind its walls. By now it was late fall. Levis did not have the power to penetrate the fortress walls. So he said, "Look, we'll keep the fortress under siege until spring. Then, when our reinforcements arrive from France, we will drive those British out of the fortress once and for all." Winter came. Stalemate. Levis waited for spring and reinforcements. Now, springtime. Ice on the St. Lawrence broke up. Everyone waited. Then they saw the ships and the sails against the horizon, coming up the St. Lawrence. The ships were loaded with guns, cannons, ammunition, and soldiers. Then they saw the ship's flags. They were British flags, not French flags. Everyone knew at that point Levis and the French could not win. The British and the results of the first battle on the Plains of Abraham would prevail. It was now indeed the fall of the French North American Empire and the consolidation of British North America. Now you know the story of the name of the city of Levis, Quebec. You may have noticed that I use the anglicized pronunciation for Levis. And really, a person should use the pronunciation that local people use, and the francophones would tend to more say Levis. So it was General Levis, and the city across from Quebec City would be pronounced Levis, Quebec, and it would be Levis, Quebec, not Quebec. Quebec is the anglicized version of the word Quebec. So it's a really correctly, I would like to say, it's Levi, Quebec. And just using the language of the other person. Whenever I have tried to use a word or two in the other person's language, you know, like a simple hello, goodbye, thank you, how much is, where is, things like that, I have always had a positive reaction from the other person. Because really, when you use a word or two in the other person's language, the implicit message is, I accept you. I accept your culture, your way of life, the way that you do things. I'm accepting of that. And when you travel, that's an awfully important thing to do. That's really one reason for travel itself. So getting back to the pronunciation, I apologize for not using the word, the francophone version. Just a final word about that British-French struggle for dominance in North America. The British prevailed and the French lost for two fundamental reasons. One was the King of France, Louis XV, who was, history has shown, a loser. He was a long-term king, but he was a mediocre person and lost most of the French Empire around the world to either the British or the Spanish. And the troops that he sent in and the reinforcements to General Levis, too little, too late. The story of his life. So inept French leadership was one problem. The other problem was that how each country perceived the New World. The British saw the New World as a place to expand, to make Britain in another place. And they therefore not only put in colonists into the New World, but they paid attention to them and they supplied them and supported them. Whereas in contrast, the France saw the New World as just a faraway place to exploit. And they therefore were able to build their fur trading empire all across the upper part of North America. But they saw it as a place to exploit rather than a place to expand France as another country in its empire. And that fundamental perception made a difference in the long run and helped enable the British to prevail over the French. All right, I hope you enjoyed this travelogue, and we've got others on Quebec City and Montreal, and we're going to other places as well. So if you like what you saw, hit the subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and we can bring you more of these videos. Goodbye, au revoir, mes amis.